Hello and welcome to the maiden voyage of Constructive Interference. I am your host, Joel Curtinitis, and I, along with my co-host and partner in crime, Josh Hugo, would like to invite you to spend some time with us today and every week to discuss current events and science and tech and gaming and entertainment and theology and, even politics. See, I think most of what we experience every day is, to some degree, it's just a lot of noise, right? I mean, we have the noise of family and of work and of government and sports, and man, you know what? You get to the end of the day and there's just too many threads to pull together and make sense of. So for a growing number of people, podcasts actually just add to the confusion. I mean, depending on what you listen to, you could add a bunch of extra worry about secret terrorist cells or Wi-Fi causing cancer. No offense to Alex Jones or any other Green Party folks who might be listening. But that's where constructive interference stands alone. See, we hope to share something new with you, whether it's information or edification or just plain old fun. But along the way, we're going to attempt to tie those disparate threads together and emphasize just how, if you tune things the right way, the noise of life can really become an incredibly complex symphony. So we're glad you joined us today. Thanks for taking the time. And first up, what we have today is basically what everybody else in the country is talking about right now. This, one giant stake right through the middle of America, and his name is Brett Kavanaugh. And so we're just going to be hitting Kavanaugh and more Kavanaugh. But it's not just because, we want to be current with what's going on. It's because this is a really, really important situation that's developing right now with this nominee to the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh. Of course, the situation with him right now, he's waiting for a floor vote on the Senate to be confirmed. But there's been a tremendous amount of controversy around his nomination. He was nominated by President Trump some time ago, been vetted out, ran through the background checks and all that. And then this controversy erupted last week on the Senate Judiciary Committee, where a series of accusations against him for alleged sexual misconduct or sexual assault 35 plus years ago, when he was in his teens, surfaced. And so where things stand with him right now, as all of this controversy swirls, is that he is there is an FBI investigation about the allegations proceeding at the moment, and then pending the results of that, there will be a floor vote scheduled in the immediate future. So that's where things stand right now. And what we want to do is kind of break down some of the things that are going on with this, about whether it's cultural or philosophical, some of the complexity of this issue, and get around some of the talking points that keep getting hurled back and forth left and right. And at this point, it's about time I introduce you to my co-host, Josh Hugo. Josh, what do you think about this whole Kavanaugh thing?
Well, I think that I really was hoping to have something a little bit more lighthearted, maybe a little bit more variety on this first broadcast. But Joel, the universe is not cooperating with that agenda. The universe is orchestrated that at this time there's really only one thing to be talked about, because this thing is of such paramount importance.
Right. I mean, there's so much. So Fortnite Season 6 just opened up, and heads up, I'm a gaming guy. I love it. I'm into the Fortnite thing. I got hooked early, and there's a lot to talk about there. But you know what? I can't even get to that because Kavanaugh is all over everything, and I can't even have a conversation on Xbox Live without Kavanaugh coming up.
So disappointing. But it is what it is. But, so yeah, I mean, Kavanaugh, obviously everyone's talking about this, but I feel like there are very few people who are really grasping what I think is the real significance of this case. Everybody's obsessed with, is he innocent? Is he guilty? Who do you believe? What do the facial expressions of Kavanaugh and his accuser, Dr. Ford, what do their expressions mean when they're talking? Who do you sympathize with, et cetera, et cetera? But to me, these things are all rather tangential. I think this Kavanaugh case has actually grown beyond merely who ends up on the Supreme Court, has grown beyond partisanship, has even grown beyond whether the allegations are true. Because I think that what is happening here is really a more fundamental assault, not on Kavanaugh himself, but on the idea of truth. And
that's kind of a radical statement.
It is. And I've thought about it a lot. And do I really want to make a statement that radical? But I think it's warranted. If you would, Joel, I have a clip here by Senator Richard Blumenthal, which is a quote that he said speaking to the accuser, Dr. Ford, during the Senate committee hearing on September 27th.
Yep, I will go ahead and kick that off right now.
I have found your testimony powerful and credible, and I believe you. You're a teacher, correct?
Correct.
Well, you have given America an amazing teaching moment. And you may have other moments in the classroom, but you have inspired and you have enlightened America. You have inspired and given courage to women. You have inspired and you have enlightened men in America. And that is a profound public service, regardless of what happens with this nomination.
Inspired and enlightened America.
And done a profound public
strong
service.
words. Wow. Okay.
Now, those words would not be disturbing or problematic depending on what they were being spoken about. Now, if it were true that Dr. Ford, with her accusations, had brought some truth to light, if it were true that she had proven something, if it were true that she had taken this man who is known to be evil and taken him down, then perhaps these words might be warranted. But the fact is, that's not what's happening here. The fact is that none of her accusations are actually proven. As of right now, there is no substantiating evidence aside from her word. There are no other witnesses to corroborate what she has said. There is no circumstantial evidence to corroborate what she has said. And Judge Kavanaugh himself denies it completely.
Now, I have to take issue with one part of what you said. You said there's no evidence, and there clearly is a critical piece of evidence here, and that is a trending Twitter hashtag of Believe Survivors. So that counts as evidence. I mean, I don't know where you're coming from that there's no evidence, because clearly if enough people on Twitter say something, that makes it true. I mean, we've known this for a long time, so I don't know where you get off.
Well, Joel, what you just said was a perfect articulation of the problem that is being created here. What do we consider to be evidence? What do we consider to be proof of something? So according to what we just heard Senator Blumenthal say, Ford has done this public service. She's enlightened everybody. The world is a better, brighter place with a greater quantity of unicorns and rainbows than existed previously because of what she has done. But all she's actually done is simply make an accusation. Mm-hmm. As far as we know, we have no reason to believe that anything she said has actually happened, and yet she's being praised in this way. And we have all the people on Twitter with their hashtags saying that we have to believe her and that we should. So let me ask you,
first of all, do you even think that these, when things like this get trending and when people come out and say, hey, you've enlightened and inspired us all, do you think that that's spontaneous, or do you think that this is, I'm looking for, how cynical a person you are here, but do you think this is spontaneous, or do you think that this was planned and staged in order to cause exactly what it's causing right now?
Well, gee, Joel, I don't know. We do know that Senator Feinstein had the accusation 6 weeks before she brought it forward and sat on it for all that time, and she sat on it until a critical moment when she would be able to delay the confirmation hearings in this way. So, based upon that, I'm going to guess that probably not a lot of spontaneity is occurring here.
Goodness, you are just such a cynic. I don't even understand.
It's a gift.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I penned an article for the Des Moines Register last week, and the title of it was "Without Proof: #Believe Survivors Undermines Justice and Democracy," and kind of the basis of what I'm getting at is exactly what you mentioned. The hashtag throws out there all boldly and audaciously "Believe Survivors." But that's not, it's kind of a misnomer, right? Because right now we're supposed to believe alleged survivors. And it creates this logical loop where you're believing someone because they claim to be a survivor and you should believe survivors. I mean, we don't know. And it could very well have happened. I mean, in this case, it seems, a lot of people have said that Dr. Ford's testimony was very moving, and that they do believe something happened. I mean, even Judge Kavanaugh himself said he has no doubt that something happened, just that he's not the man. And so I think there's this emotional appeal on that side to, hey, we need to believe survivors. Look at the effects that it will have on other women if you're not believed. But the problem is this: when you say believe survivors, but you don't know that they even are survivors, you're really just saying believe accusers. And that doesn't belong in American politics. Like that's straight out of a Soviet gulag. I mean, believe accusers. This is out of every dystopian novel you've ever read, right? Does anybody want to live in a society where you just believe accusers?
Well, evidently all of Twitter does.
Well,
but,
yeah,
I'm
about
not sure
43% of America.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they've really thought through the implications there. But yeah, so like you said, so without this proof, and that's what Senator Blumenthal, what he's praising Dr. Ford for, again, is accusing. He's praising her for accusing and saying that her accusing is the public service. And we have all these people who are saying we need to believe survivors, which, as you say, really means believe accusers. So that's why I say that I think this is really, at this point, it's bigger than partisanship. It's bigger than who gets to be on the Supreme Court. It is really an attack on the very idea of truth. Because what we're being told here is not that we should believe facts, not that we should believe evidence, not that we should believe logic and reasoned argument, but that we should believe accusers. And
and without any corroboration at the moment.
Yeah. And so what this comes down to is, and again, which accusers? Are all accusers created equal here? There's another clip, if you mind, another clip here. This is by Senator Harino, who is another Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. This quote is from her on CNN with Jake Tapper from September 23rd.
All right, let's roll that one.
Doesn't Kavanaugh have the same presumption of innocence as anyone else in America?
I put his denial in the context of everything that I know about him in terms of how he approaches his cases. As I said, his credibility is already very questionable in my mind and in the minds of a lot of my fellow Judiciary Committee members, the Democrats. So he comes and, when I say that he's very outcome driven, he has an ideological agenda. He very much is against women's reproductive choice. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you two very important cases in which he applied the same standard but came to totally different results to make it much harder for women to get this kind of coverage. So there are so many indications of his own lack of credibility.
It sounds to me like you're saying because you don't trust him on policy and because you don't believe him when he says, for instance, that he does not have an opinion on Roe v. Wade. You don't believe him about this allegation about what happened at the party in 1982.
Well, this is why it is so important that there be at least an investigation so that there's some effort at collaboration.
So Senator Harino there, yeah, I mean, she's not coming right out and giving a direct answer there, but by her obfuscation, you can tell what she means. He says, Jake Tapper says to her, isn't Kavanaugh entitled to presumption of innocence? And she doesn't say yes. And he asks, so are you doubting him because of his policies? And she doesn't say no. Mm-hmm. So when we say, okay, believe accusers, believe all accusers? No, we need to believe accusers on ideological grounds. Who are they accusing? Are they accusing the people we think are bad? If they are, then we should believe them. And that's basically what all this is coming down to.
Right, and just to add a little spice to that, okay, this has made me a little bit salty throughout this whole thing. There is this act on the blue side of the Senate, like, well, you know what, we need more information. We can't make up our minds on Kavanaugh. It's unfair to ram this process and hurry things up. Okay, look, almost all of these people have come out and said flatly that they will do anything to stop Kavanaugh from getting on the Supreme Court before any of this ever came up. I mean, long before any of it came up. These people were on the record saying, basically he's the devil. And Kavanaugh mentioned some of those things in his rebuttal speech as well. I mean, one of the senators went on a news or an interview and said that he was going to be responsible for the deaths of millions of Americans? Really? Like, this was said about this man before he even sat down to testify in front of the committee. So I think it's just, adding to this whole thing is just the total disingenuousness of these folks bringing up the accusations. Like, well, you know what? We really wanted to vote for this guy, but we're really concerned about these allegations from 35 years ago. We need to continue looking into that. It's very transparent, and it's just really wrong.
Well, also, not only did they say that they would do anything it took to stop Kavanaugh from being seated, they also came out and said that they believed Dr. Ford. Like that quote from Blumenthal that we played just now, that was delivered toward the beginning of her testimony. I mean, she hadn't really come forward and told her story at that time. And all of the Democratic senators on the Judiciary Committee made similar speeches to her, where basically before she spoke, before she gave her testimony, they all told her they believed her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's crazy. I mean, when you look at the kind of things that are being said, and this I think is where, here at Constructive Interference, we try to take a different approach on this. So look, we could do partisan demagoguery on this forever, right? I mean, there's a lot of podcasts where you can just hop on and hear somebody, own the libs or go full attack dog on issues like this. But I think that this is much more than just politics, and it has been. I mean, this has been consuming my thoughts for the last couple of weeks, because I think of the implications that go way, way, way beyond even the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land, and honestly, to listen to at least half of our government officials is the highest branch of government. So that's enough stakes as it is, but it goes so much further than that, and I think that's why it's incredibly dangerous when you hear like for instance, one of the main demagogues, I guess, of the hearing was Senator Cory Booker, Democratic Senator Cory Booker, and one of the things that he kept saying was he kept using this phrase, "your truth." Thanks for speaking your truth. And again, not to launch too far into 1984 here, but I'm not the one launching us there. Okay, the Ministry of Truth. If you think about that from the book 1984, I mean, the idea of your truth, the idea that truth is subjective. And honestly, I think that's the philosophical basis for what you're saying, which is people who agree with me are telling the truth because what I believe is my truth. Therefore, anybody who agrees with me is right. And that is it's a really, really dangerous place to get, because once you get into that, there's not really any coming out. How do you convince somebody who has accepted my truth that it's wrong? On what basis do you even challenge that?
Well, you can't. There's no basis. I mean,
right.
Once you have abandoned truth, abandoned that as a concept, abandoned truth as an ideal, once you've lost interest in truth, you have no basis to argue for anything. All you have is this sort of might makes right, where my side has the most voices, my side has the most people tweeting the hashtag, and therefore my side is correct.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think the implications of this, and by the way, this whole thing politically is already backfiring on Democrats. Democrats were way ahead in the polls, way ahead in the enthusiasm gap. That gap has dropped to a within the margin of error difference now, because Republicans on their side are so afraid of what's going on right now with Kavanaugh. It's just unbelievable. But I think there's more blowback yet to come from this, because I'm telling you right now, like where I'm coming from is, okay, so I'm a libertarian. Okay, that's my background. Is I was a Ron Paul guy back in the day, worked in politics and campaigning up here in Iowa where I live. It's politics 24/7. But personally, I come at things from a libertarian point of view. I agree with some things that are more traditionally liberal. I agree with some things that are more traditionally conservative. But where I see this going, there's going to be there is going to be a major blowback on other issues that the Democrats can't possibly foresee with this. And part of it's just going to be keeping their own coalition together. So, for instance, you're talking about your truth and them coming out in this wholesale embracing of things just because they're said. Now, how do you leave a testimony like that and walk out to a science, a science event and promote climate change? How do you do that? Because what they do on climate change is they come out and say, you know what, we have to believe the facts. We have to believe the empirical data that's coming across. And this is not a statement of the validity or the veracity of climate change as a whole. I'm just saying, how do you turn around on one hand and say, you know what, thank you for sharing your truth. I'm going to go ruin this guy's life now. And then turn around and say, hey, you know what? I don't care what you've been told on climate change. Here's the empirical evidence. We need to agree with that.
Well, I mean, you kind of answered your own question by mentioning 1984 again. I mean, 1984 is a very famous, and rightfully so, and it gets thrown around a lot. But I think a lot of people forget kind of what that book is about. You know, people think, well, you think 1984, you think Orwellian, you think the surveillance state, you think cameras on every street corner and all that, which is, of course, part of the book. But people forget the reason why all those cameras were there in the book, and the reason was to prevent people from having their own truth. Basically, truth was illegal. And in 1984, truth was simply, there wasn't people, Twitter mobs or senators trying to determine what truth was. It was the party would tell you what was true. The party would dictate their official truth, and you were obligated to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this technique, mentioned in 1984, called doublethink. Which is basically that you have two ideas in your mind that just don't make any sense at all. But you simply develop a mental technique of not letting them touch each other. I can have this idea in my mind, that black is white.
Well, without consent anyway.
Yes. Only consensual touching of ideas. Anyway. But yeah. So where do you go with that? How do you shift from my truth, from believe accusers, and then go and talk about the objective facts and the science we need to believe? Well, the fact is, you simply don't think about it. You develop a mental technique where you compartmentalize all of these things. And in one context, you think one way. In another context, you think another way. And you feel good about it. And the risk
cognitive dissonance, I think, is the term that we use.
Well, it's how you avoid cognitive dissonance. It's
right.
Because you don't let the two sound waves play together, which is something people can do. And again, that's the scary thing here. That's the thing here that really scares me. Because I'm not. You mentioned being a libertarian. You sell out. You traitor to both causes. So I'll come out here and say, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. I'm not a fan of the Republican Party. I don't consider myself to be really partisan. Yeah, I totally lost my train of thought. I have no idea what I was going to say. No
well,
idea at all.
Talking about Donald Trump tends to make one do that. I mean, and thanks for just killing off half our MAGA audience right there, man. I mean, nobody.
I'm sorry.
If you're a fan of Donald Trump, please forgive my co-host at this moment. We bow and worship at the altar of Trump every other day when Josh isn't having these. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Don't
joke.
dox us, please.
For real,
no, it's a valid point. No worries. It's a valid point. I mean, it's a valid concern, and it kind of brings us to the question that I have. Okay, so like I said, sort of in the middle, more libertarian, looking at both parties this fall, and going into this, I have actually spent the last 2+ years involved with third party efforts. I'm disgusted with both the major parties. When I say libertarian, I mean small L libertarian. The big L libertarian party, it's just a joke. I wish that I could be excited about the Libertarian Party, but at least on the national level, the Libertarian Party, even though it has been gaining more popularity, it's not there yet. It doesn't have the respect to be able to compete with the others. So the point is, when I came into this election, I was still looking at third party options. But I tell you what, this Kavanaugh hearing is so powerful, is so far-reaching in its consequences, that as I've watched this, I have had to seriously sit there and ask myself the question: can I risk letting these people that are trying to destroy Brett Kavanaugh's life over unfounded allegations? Can I risk them being in power? Can I take that chance to continue with third-party activism and whatnot? And I think that's where you're seeing the enthusiasm gap disappear. Is you've got a lot of very frightened people who are actually just fans of liberty, who look at it and go, I don't want to live, as much as I don't like the Republicans. And, we've seen some unlikely heroes arise out of this, right? Like Mitch McConnell bullying the votes through. You got Lindsey Graham out there shellacking the other side. These are not conservative stalwarts by any means. These are people who, and Lindsey Graham even acknowledged as much, they have been friends with the Democrats typically. And they've, really royally ticked off their own base by their willingness to compromise. And so when you see people like that coming out and getting fired up and going after the Democrats for the stunts that they're pulling, I think that we're reaching a point of no return. And that's what I look at this thing, the broader context, and say, can we come back from this as a society? Can that side? I mean, even if say the Democrats don't win in November, say that the blue wave doesn't happen, will they learn from that? Will they back down from this, or can you see that side? Or at least the fringe elements on that side trying to say, well, we just didn't go far enough, because that's the tendency with extremes on both sides, right? And there was Tea Party groups that did the same thing on the right.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how far back you can really walk this. I mean, well, I was there. I remember I was watching CNN on the night of the election, and I just remember when they realized that Trump was going to win, just like a change swept over everybody's faces, just like this sort of shock and awe that this horrible thing that they could never envision happening had happened. Because I mean, Hillary Clinton was the first woman president for 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Right.
She spent 25 years being the anointed one who's going to finally break the glass ceiling, and then all of a sudden Trump comes along and he wins, and it was shocking. And
well, it's your fault, you sexist.
I won't admit that I didn't vote for. Oops. Well, that's the thing. Like you're saying, it's like I didn't vote for Trump. I voted for Darrell Castle, third party, the last election, because I was concerned with principle. I'm not a fan of the Republican Party. For a number of reasons, and I didn't feel like I could vote for Donald Trump in good conscience. But at this point, with what I'm seeing happen with Kavanaugh, with this just assault on truth, I'm not sure they're doing it on purpose. That's another thing. As I'm not sure the Democrats are really knowingly wanting to assault truth and bring about this Orwellian truthless society. I think perhaps they're playing with forces they don't really understand. They just want to win, and this is a tactic, and they don't really realize what they're doing. I don't know. But regardless, I see what they are doing. And this truthless society they're trying to usher in here, or that they are ushering in, is so terrifying to me that they've convinced me that maybe I need to vote for Donald Trump,
Well, right. I mean, it is terrifying. And you look at the concept of the whole truthless society thing. I think there's a place where you can't justify the risk at some point. And to your point about whether they know what they're doing or not, I think there's usually, especially in political things, I think to some extent in all of culture, but especially in politics, there's a percentage of people, usually small, that does know what they're doing. And it's a tactic, it's a strategy, it's just something that they expect to blow over. And then there is a much, much larger percentage that don't know what they're doing. They're following the leader, they're identifying with their tribe, and they're heading out with the torches and pitchforks to burn down the Bastille. Okay? That I think is the danger here, because there's a handful of people at the very highest levels of government who are treating this as a ploy, they're treating it as a strategy, and frankly, nothing is going to happen to them if all of this goes south. If these people lose their jobs in November, they're going to be well taken care of the rest of their lives. They're going to have lots of consulting and high-profile dinners where people will golf clap to hear them speak, okay? Nothing is going to come back on them. But for the rest of us in the cheap seats, there's going to be long, enduring consequences to what's going on right now. And I think this also, excuse me, I'm still getting over a cold here. I think this also points back to something that is a common theme. We talk about threads here on constructive interference, tying the threads together. There's a thread that runs through this, and it ties back to an article that I wrote several years ago about the death of moral relativism. Moral relativism was the enemy in the 90s when I was a kid. That was the enemy, right? If you were growing up and you were part of the religious right, or you were part of the pro-liberty crowd, any of that stuff, you realized that moral relativism couldn't coexist with those things. And everybody just assured us, we'll just go along to get along, tolerance will be the new virtue, and everything will be fine. We don't really need these rigid moral rules anyway. But what we're finding out is that we have to have those as a society, and I think that's where you see on the left, especially among progressives, although I will say in the post-Donald Trump world, you see a lot of this sort of relativism prevailing on the right too, and it's a little bit frightening. But especially on the left now, they've been at it for so long, and public education, I think, is a part of it too. Part of the blame is, that's taken away so much of that moral element that it's starting to cannibalize itself. And what I mean by that is that you have people now who were raised to believe that there is no moral and immoral. Follow what you feel. Do what you think is right. Follow your heart. I mean, everybody that watched Disney learned that, right? And what you end up with is a lot of people who have a moral hole, and they're looking to fill it somehow. And how do you fill it when you don't have that objective context? You say these things are right, these things are wrong. This is my objective standards by which I judge right and wrong. What are you left with? My truth. That's what's left. What's left is my truth. And then you go out and you try to assert your truth onto the world, and you find people that agree with you. And that's how you develop it. And that's why I say the thread that ties this together, I think, is a search for a new morality to replace the old one. And that is where Brett Kavanaugh has become. He's right in the crosshairs of this new morality, because in this new morality, it's the ends that justify the means. And if the end is preserving the policies that they want to see preserved and staying off the balance of the Supreme Court being up for grabs in 2018, then it doesn't matter what they do to him. They could string him up by a tree tomorrow, nobody would care, right? Because that is moral. Somebody came out and was mentioning, oh, they wouldn't impeach him. That's going too far. No. If they win power in November, and I believe that this whole process, they've been setting the stage. They usually do have a fallback. Okay, everybody that's at that level, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, they have a fallback plan. Okay, trust me, they're paid to do this. If he gets in, they're going to go after him in impeachment, and they might go after Clarence Thomas as a bonus prize. I mean, they are going to ride this as far as it'll take them. So I think that's the thread that ties this together. But am I wrong? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, going after Clarence Thomas was actually mentioned during the hearing.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I forget which of the senators it was that mentioned it, but he said that we failed Anita Hill when we didn't when we failed to believe her. We failed to believe the accuser, and that was wrong. So this time we're going to make sure that we believe the accuser because that's what's right.
But unreal. Yeah. And then and with the Anita Hill thing, I mean that was never conclusively proved either. And Justice Clarence Thomas has been a conservative stalwart for years on the court now. But whenever people on the left cite Justice Thomas, they always talk about Anita Hill, and that's part of the play. I think is to ideally they want to control the confirmations, and he wouldn't be confirmed. But if they lose that, the backup plan is make sure that he'll never have a clean reputation, make sure that your side hates him worse than hell itself. These are the fallback plans because, and this is where my cynicism from working in politics for a while shows through, because at the end of the day, once again, these people are not going to pay for it. The people that are saying these things, these outrageous things, they're still going to go to all the high-end dinner parties in D.C., okay? Nothing's going to happen to them. But the people in the trenches for years later, that's where they want to see this fight continue. And especially because a lot of them that whether they're politicians or whether they're ex-politicians, they end up lobbying and they end up doing fundraising and they end up sending you a bunch of emails that you really don't want to read, talking about how dangerous and horrible the other side is and why you need to scrape some money out of your savings account to chip in $20. Okay, that's what so much of this is about, and that's where I see, even more depth to this. And I hope that people, as they're watching the Kavanaugh drama unfold, don't just look at it as politics, because it's not just politics. Okay, this is going to impact our justice system. This is going to impact our nomination and congressional system. It's going to impact your family. It's going to impact the way that your kids perceive innocence and guilt. I mean, it's going to impact so much. And I look at that and I say, you know what? This is one area that's just tied so deeply into the rest of our life. I don't know if we can afford to take chances with it. And I think that's going to wrap it up for us here tonight. Thanks so much for joining us on Constructive Interference. It's been great talking with you this evening. Have a great week.